Hello there and welcome to Candy Meets. My guest this evening is one of Ulster's top television personalities, a man who is renowned for his wit, his friendly manner and his laughing eyes, and who in the line of duty was once dropped by wrestler giant Haystacks from a height of 9 feet onto a hard studio floor. He actually lived to tell the tale. He's the multi-talented Jackie Fullerton, who, during his 12 years with Ulster Television, has faced many challenges, but probably none so daunting as his first day in the studio, when he was thrown in at the deep end.
Yes, in fact, it was September 1973, the new series of Sportscast, and I'd taken over from Gordon Burns. And I'd only done about 3 pieces in the studio, straight to cameras, interviews, that sort of thing, but those were recorded. So here we are, live on a Saturday afternoon at 5:20, when the football matches, the rugby matches, they've only really ended at 20 to 5, so it's all a bit of a whirl, and I don't know really what's happening, because I'm as green as the grass, completely new to this. And all I've got is a smile and hello and welcome. And how I ever get through that program, I'll never know. But the interesting fact about it, in fact, looking back to that time, I didn't feel nervous on the first program. I didn't know anything about the business, the technicalities. Had film gone down or anything, I wouldn't obviously have known how to cope. But I didn't feel anything. I remember coming off and saying to my producer at that time, who was the former political correspondent, Derek Murray, I said it was great because I didn't feel nervous. And I think that's because it was a novelty.
Yes. I wonder how that made him feel, that statement coming from you.
Well, he looked at me disbelievingly and he said, "Don't worry, you will be."
Yes, yes.
And he was right, because the following week I was very nervous.
Who was responsible for bringing you in, Jackie, in the first place, and how did that come about?
Well, it was a gentleman who was program controller at that time, Sidney Perry. And what had happened, because I was playing Irish League football with Crusaders, Gordon Burns, who was presenter of Sportscast the previous year, he'd thought that they would do a penalty prize competition. So he wanted 4 Irish League footballers, 4 Gaelic players, and 4 rugby players. I think he took the top 4 goal scorers in the Irish League at that time, and I happened to be 4th. I don't know how, but I was. So in we go, and we recorded the whole thing in one night, and UTV entertained us afterwards. And I got speaking to Sidney Perry. And because I'd also played junior inter-pro cricket for Ulster, we talked about cricket, and he was a cricket buff, and we talked long about the old days. And I was remembering people like Hugh Tayfield, the old South African who played in the 50s and so on. So that must have impressed him. We talked about snooker, we talked about golf, because I was interested in play that, most other sports. So about a month later, that's fine, I remember I was playing for Crusaders, and we'd been beaten by Glentoran in the second round of the Irish Cup at Seaview, 2-1, and we should have won the game. So I come off feeling rather poorly about this, because I'd played poorly myself, and the side had played poorly. We're out of the Irish Cup. And Robin Walsh, who was then news editor here, and an old cricketing buddy of mine, he said, "When you get dressed, I'll see you afterwards, because I've got Sidney Perry with me." And I almost didn't go because of how I was feeling. I was so disappointed about the result. But I did go along, and out of the blue, Sidney said to me, "Would you be interested in television?" So that's really how it happened. I couldn't believe this.
Had you entertained the thought up till then at all?
Well, my answer to him was that because I was 29, 30 at that time, and obviously football was coming to an end, I had thought about newspaper journalism, which always appealed to me, even though I was working in accountancy at the time. News journalism, sporting journalism appealed to me. And I said to him, well, that's interested me, but television, whether I could do it or not, that's another thing. But yes, I would be interested. And he said, well, I think you might have a chance. We'll arrange an audition. And I came in for an audition, and I did a straight to camera, I remember. They gave me 2 minutes of sporting news, which Gordon Burns helped prepare me for. And he was a great help, I must say that to him at the time. So I did this one audition, and I thought, yeah, that wasn't too bad.
You just had to read it, did you?
I just had to read it and try and put a bit of oomph into it. So a few weeks later, I was called in for a second audition. And this time they asked me to, apart from reading some stuff straight to camera, they wanted me to do an interview. And I thought, well, that's strange if they want me to be a football reporter, go along to a game on a Saturday, dash back to the studio and do a 1-minute report to camera as a football reporter. But I did this, and Gordon Burns showed me the first attempt I'd made, and it was so bad. It was the voice was just on the one level, and I thought I'd really been punchy. So he said, no, you've really got to go over the top. So I did it again, did the interview, and about 3 weeks later, Sidney Perry called me, and he said, we'd like you to join the sportscast team.
Wonderful. Was it a mock interview? Was it with a local personality or what?
It was with another footballer, so it was a football interview, but it was slightly political at that time, and it was with another guy who was a contender, obviously, for the job. But Sidney called me, and he says, we're quite impressed, and we'd like you to join the sportscast team. And I thought, well, does he want me to make tea behind the scenes and carry script and so on? What does this mean? Because I didn't know anything about the business. And I said, what does that mean? And he says, well, we see you as the presenter of the program. And my mouth dropped open because I didn't realize that Gordon Burns was leaving at that time.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe this. So it was sheer luck, and obviously
Was it an instant
chance.
decision you made?
Well, the thing was that I was...
It's like a gift from God, really, isn't it?
Yes, I think we read these things about other people
Yeah.
and the lucky breaks they get. And here I was. I mean, it was unbelievable to me. The decision I had to make, because Crusaders, we'd won the league championship, and we were going into the European Cup. And he said, where does it leave your football? So I did think about that. But I'd had the memory of playing in the European Cup with Derry City. And I thought, well, I'm almost 30. We've just won the league, so it's a nice place to end a career. And who knows, it's a great chance I'm being offered. So it wasn't that big a decision, really.
Are you glad you made it?
Yes, I was, because at that time I was still part-time. I was doing television on a Saturday and doing accountancy during the week. I mean, they're a bit different, aren't they?
Very chalk and cheese.
But it was a nice chance, and I then had to make the decision after about 2 years if I wanted to go full-time. But I did like the television business. Apart from appearing in front of the camera, I did like the whole production side. And
You must be a bit of a gambler by nature, Jackie, because, I mean, accountancy is something that is solid and very, very secure, isn't it? I mean, here you were coming into television. Did you have a contract? Did you think that it was something that was going to last forever? Or really, was it just a gamble?
In fact, that's a very good question, because I felt it was a gamble at that time. They weren't offering me a contract, Ulster Television. They were saying nice things, that I had potential and possibilities. But the decision was made easier for me because my wife, Linda, is a school teacher. So we had her income. But here I was giving up a professional salary. I did have a wife and 2 youngsters at that time. And it took a few months. And then I thought, well, and it was really Linda who said, well, you should take the chance because you will always regret. And you will always wonder what might have happened if you don't. So with her help, I'll always be grateful for that, I took the decision, and thankfully it's worked out, and it's a new career for me, which I loved.
What about Jackie Fullerton, the child? Where did you grow up?
Ballymena. Can you tell
Ballymena.
by the accent?
No, I can't. What happened to that accent?
Well, in fact, many people have asked me that. They said, where did you get the Oxford accent from? And I don't have an Oxford accent, but what happened, I played a year's football in South Africa. So I lived near Johannesburg for a year. And what I discovered over there, Ulster folk talk very quickly. And,
I've noticed.
So I discovered that I had to speak slowly and properly if they were to understand me. And I used to use slang words like, for ice cream, I was talking about a slider.
Yes.
That sort of thing. And they looked at me as if I had 2 heads. So I had to lose the slang words. I had to speak slowly and I had to speak properly. So I think that helped the voice.
Do you find you go back into it when you go home?
Yes, I do. In fact, I just had a week off at Christmas there. And the day I arrived back in the building here, one of our production assistants said to me, have you been back in Ballymena during the holidays? I said, yes, I have. She says, yeah, because you're talking very Ballymena.
Did you have a happy childhood?
Yes, I had. I was born towards the end of the war, so things weren't plentiful. But I never remember being hungry. We didn't really want for anything. We were a working class family. But it was happy.
How many of you were there?
I have a brother, an older brother, Jimmy, and a younger sister, Maureen. But in those days, in the mid-40s and late 40s, there was just Jimmy and myself, and Maureen came along early 50s. But it was a happy childhood, and playing football every day after school and so on.
Were your parents very supportive?
Yes, they were very good. They didn't restrict us too much. At that time, obviously, I think there was more discipline in family life. They didn't let us stay out until all hours of the morning, that sort of thing. I mean, I didn't, unfortunately, I smoke, and I didn't smoke in front of my father until I was about 18 years of age because of the fear of what he would say.
What about church, religion?
Oh, yes, Sunday school, church, boys' brigade, which really were some of the happiest days when I look back. And the guys I was with in the boys' brigade are still my friends today. And that's a great training. And I must say I've encouraged my 3 sons, and all of them are in the boys' brigade or the Robins, and I think it's a great training and a great character builder.
When did you leave home, Jackie? What age were you?
The first time I left home, and it was quite an experience, was 66 to go to South Africa, and I was 22 years of age then. And I'd always had my mother there, washing clothes, ironing the clothes, providing the food. Here I was, the first 6 weeks in South Africa, I lived in a hotel, and I had to wash shirts and wash socks and try to iron things, and it was a disaster. I really missed my mum at that time.
It was really like leaving the cloister at the age of 22, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, it was the first time I'd really been away. And
were you very much a man of the world?
No,
at
I
that
wasn't.
Stage?
I wasn't. I think at 22 we all think we're men of the world, but here I was in a strange country with strange people, but some very nice people. But I think what it did do for me, I think it helped me mature. Because Mum and Dad had always been there, and here I was on my own, had to make a living for myself as well as playing football, and I think it was a good experience for me. Obviously, I missed my family, but I think at that time, at 22 years of age, which is quite old really to be leaving the nest for the first time, people today do it much younger, don't they? But I think I missed my friends at that time, and we had a routine where we're going to dances, we're single guys, and I'm with my mates, and we're going to see Dickie Rock in the Miami, and Butch and the Capitol and all this sort of thing. And I think I missed the social life more than my family. That's not to put my family down, but I think you know what I'm saying.
What about the food?
It wasn't much different. It was very nice. The climate was much better. It was super. I remember going to Durban at Easter for 4 days and swimming in the Indian Ocean, where it doesn't take the heart from you when you step in. And that was absolutely glorious. It was a marvelous country, and the standard of living was very high. And I remember at that time in my job, looking back, it doesn't sound much now, but I was earning £100 a month, and my net pay after income tax and national insurance, etc., was something like £87. So the total was only 13% knocked off, which is a bit different from today in Britain.
Indeed, isn't it? How did you come to go to South Africa in the first place?
Well, in fact, I saw something in the press that a club in Johannesburg, Boksburg actually, which is about 20 miles from Johannesburg, were looking for a number of players. And I wasn't really into accountancy or a career at that time. I wasn't heading anywhere very quickly. So I thought, well, that might be an idea. And it's a chance to see another country, and a chance maybe to carve out some sort of a future for myself. So I wrote off, and it wasn't because I was one of the best players in the Irish League. I think there were 4 of us went at that time. And
what was the standard like over there compared to home?
The standard was about the same, playing-wise, but what impressed me at that time, because we must remember that South Africa, even today, it's not a member of FIFA, and it really was the backwater of football and an entity in world football terms. But I went out there, we were playing in the First Division, and I think 13 of the 16 clubs in the First Division had floodlights. Now, this is 1966. I think possibly 2 teams in Irish football had floodlights. And at that time, they had 2 sponsored competitions. I remember it was the BP National League and the Coca-Cola Cup. And that was long before sponsorship had reached Irish football. And I thought, well, if South Africa's a backwater, they're doing very well.
Modesty aside, would you have been good enough to make it as a professional footballer?
No, I
Was
wouldn't.
that ever the dream?
It was always the dream. I think it's every young footballer's dream, particularly at that time. But even so today, I think most youngsters who kick a ball, they want to play for the Manchester Uniteds or the Liverpools or the Arsenals. I was never tough enough, being honest. I was never aggressive enough. So I never really thought about going to England. But it's funny, because when I was in South Africa, my manager at the time, and a lot of the football people will remember him, was a fellow called Don Kitchenbrand, who'd been a big centre forward for Glasgow Rangers. And I remember when I was coming home, he says, look, you've had a good season, he says, and I think you could make it in British football, full-time football. He said, I'll get you a trial with Glasgow Celtic. And I said, well, actually, I think it might be Rangers. And he says, you mean you're not a Catholic from Ireland? I said, no. I think all South Africans thought everybody in Ireland was Catholics. So that was funny, and we had a laugh about that.
When you left South Africa, where did you go?
I arrived back in Ballymena and was very soon married after that. So really it was a lady called Linda who helped make up my mind to stay.
But where did you meet Linda?
Oh, I think it was the Old People's Club. Oh, that sounds strange.
Yes.
Yeah, she's much older than I am. Not true, not true. No, they had a weekly hop at that time for kids of 15 and 16, and that was the first time I'd set an eye on her. And actually, my friend had been taking Linda out, and he said, there's a lovely girl, he says, Linda Russell from Kells. And I said, who? Because I'd never met Linda. And he pointed her out to me. And that was how we met. And in fact, my friend, Brian Blackadder, he ended up being best man on our wedding.
Really?
And I was best man on his wedding, as it turned out, afterwards.
How soon after your return from South Africa did you, in fact, marry?
I arrived back November 66, and I was married in August 1968.
Mm-hmm. Were you already a qualified accountant by then, Jack?
No, I never finished. I was 3/4 qualified when I came into television, which is one of my regrets, in fact, and many people have asked me that. And yes, it would have been nice to have finished it, because I'd done one part of the exams, and then I hadn't bothered. And then because the family started to come along, and I thought, well, I better do something to try and ensure the future. So I then started studying again and did part 2 and part 3 very quickly. It was cost accountancy. I was working in industry at the time. And then television came along, and part 4, sadly, was never done.
Do you think you might ever complete the course?
I don't think so now.
Why?
Well, I think I'm in this business to stay. Whether it wants me to stay or not is another thing, but I don't think so. As I said earlier, I enjoyed accountancy. I'd probably enjoy it again, but I enjoy this too much, and I mean, eventually I will leave the front of the screen when I lose these 2 teeth at the front. But I'm interested in the business, the production side, the arranging, the setting up, and seeing the finished product.
Do you think that's where you might end up, like working behind the scenes, producing, directing, perhaps?
I think so. I think more editorial producing more than directing. Although some of our directors tell me I'm directing today.
Do you really think you'd be happy doing that, having been sort of at the front for so long?
Yes, I think when you say being at the front for so long, I think it's an ego business, isn't it?
Very much so.
And one needs an ego to do it, and great confidence to do it. I mean, I've got a few years left yet, I think, and I will continue to do it as long as I enjoy it. I think over the years, as the years go on, the ego diminishes. It's not the be-all and end-all to appear on television. And whilst there's great satisfaction in doing a good show or a good commentary, I think equally there's great satisfaction in producing a show which is a good show.
Do you ever regret the loss of anonymity?
I think there's pluses and minuses, isn't there, really? It's nice because it helps get seats at the theatre or tables in restaurants, this kind of thing. But I still find it very difficult to cope with being recognised in
Really?
the street.
Do you ever feel it's an invasion of your privacy?
I
You know-
suppose it is. Other people outside the business say to me at times, how do you put up with it? How do you stick it? It's very difficult at times, but I must say that Ulster people are usually very nice, and
Yes.
it's nice things they say, and they're only being nice. And after all, as many of them have said, do forgive me for calling you Jackie, but I feel I know you because you're in my house every night.
Yes, yes. You're cursed with that devilish smile, aren't you, really? The friendly face.
Yes. So I think because it's difficult being in news, isn't it, or politics, which is very serious business in Northern Ireland. So I'm lucky that being in sport, that I'm in a job where I can smile on television,
Yes.
being in sport. So,
Have you always been a smiler?
yes, I smile easily. I remember someone in the business once said to me, could you teach me how to smile?
Lovely.
And I smiled immediately, and she
Yes.
said, like that. And I said, well, I couldn't, because I suppose I'm lucky that I can smile and talk at the same time.
Yes.
And some people can't do that. It doesn't come easily. I smile, hence I've got so many crow's feet around my eyes, you see. But I've always smiled easily, although I remember looking back to the early days, when it was all a bit tense and all a bit nervous. We'd done a rehearsal for a live sportscast, and Derek Murray, who was still the producer then, he came out to me and I said, is that fine time-wise and so on? And he says, yeah, everything's fine. And he walked away and he turned around and he says, Jackie, just one thing. I says, what? He says, for goodness sake, smile. And I've been smiling ever since.
I love it. How do your children cope with Daddy's fame?
I think it's difficult for them at times. Although having said that, sometimes when I come home and it's been a particularly important program or a particular commentary, where I come back fairly excited, the adrenaline's still pumping through me, and I'll say, what did you think? And they'll say, what do we think of what? They haven't even watched it.
Yes.
So they become a bit blasé. And I still get hurt at times
Yes.
when they say, when I say, did you see the program? And they say, no, we were watching something else on the other side. And I said, you were what?
Yes. Keeps the feet firmly planted on the
It
ground.
does. It's a great reminder, isn't it?
You said earlier that it's every footballer's dream to play in England, and I think the same can probably be said of radio, television presenters. You were given the opportunity to work in England. Why
Yes.
did you turn it down?
That's a long story. Yes, I was given the opportunity, I think it was 4 years ago, by Granada Television in Manchester. And they wanted me to come across and do their presentation of sport on a nightly basis. It was a very good chance. And professionally, that's what I'd worked for, really. But it meant moving to Manchester. And at the end of the day, cutting a long story short, I had to make a decision not only for myself, but a family decision. My son was about to go to grammar school. Education of my children had to come into it. My wife wasn't that keen on the move. And whilst I wanted to go, to accept the chance, I had to sit back and think, well, is there any point of going if 4/5 of the family aren't too happy?
Yes.
And
You're obviously a very giving sort of man.
well, I didn't realize I was until that point, and here I was having to give up an opportunity. And it was a very difficult time for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I made a family decision, and I think it was the right decision, because I think happiness is of paramount importance. And here I was really going to make a selfish decision for my career if I did go. It was, professionally, it was a big downer for me. And I must say I suffered badly for about a year.
In what way, Jackie?
Well, I felt the motivation had gone. I mean, I'd worked hard at the job to get some expertise, some polish. But I made the family decision. I've never regretted that. But it did leave me low. And then the motivation here came with the arrival of our outside broadcast unit. And we started to make programs like the Lakeland Games, more football commentaries, table tennis, Gaelic football. So that was the new motivation that I needed
Yes, right.
to get me out of that sort of depression at that time.
Yes. If maybe the timing was just wrong. So if the offer were made again, say in 1985, 86, or 87, do you think you'd turn it down a second time?
I think if the offer was right and the job was right, I would accept it this time.
If I were to ask you to list the highlights now over those 12 years, what would they be?
There have been a few. I think doing my first football commentary, which was a very unique occasion. It was very nice to be there. Lansdowne Road, Northern Ireland against the Republic of Ireland, the first time the two teams had met at international level. And I remember Derek Dugan, the former Northern Ireland striker, was my co-commentator that day. And I remember being so nervous.
Really?
And he was marvellous to me because he'd had so much experience on television, on the World Cup panels and so on. And I remember being quite pleased when I heard it back. But another highlight was obviously going to the World Cup finals with Northern Ireland. And that great night when we beat Spain 1-0. And I wasn't commentating that night. I was helping some ITV lads get Billy Bingham and Jerry Armstrong and people like that after the game very quickly for interviews. And I watched the game from right beside the pitch, and I saw all the kicking close up, and it really was a quite brutal game. And with a lump in my throat,
Really?
because there were 50,000, almost all of them Spaniards, thinking this was a formality, they would beat little Northern Ireland. And we went 1-up, and we just couldn't believe it, and then we won. And I remember getting Billy Bingham almost immediately after the game for an interview. And the tears were in Billy's eyes, and I must confess the tears were in my eyes as well.
Yes.
And that is a moment I will never forget.
The one time the smile wasn't on the Fullerton face.
That's right, that's
the
right.
tears instead.
But totally unforgettable.
You really are multi-talented, aren't you? I mean, if you hadn't been an accountant or a footballer or a television personality, you might have been a singer, because you do sing a mean song.
That's very kind of you. That's very kind of you. I am a frustrated singer, in fact, Candy. I've always enjoyed singing, because I remember being in a men's chorus in Ballymena, and there was a girls' choir as well. And we used to do shows like the Black and White Minstrels, Blacking Up the Face, the white trousers, the striped jackets, and by the light, shining light, all that sort of thing. And I loved it. And my brother, he's been a singer in groups. He's got a fine voice. My sister's been a professional singer in groups for many years. And I was really the only one who didn't sing in a group. But I would always have liked to have done that, but I never really at the time because of sport and then television. But I do enjoy singing. Whether people enjoy listening to it is another thing. And in fact, someone has spoken to me, would you believe, about making a record.
Hey, great.
Which is something I would like to do. And in fact, I'll be honest, and Jerry Kelly can bear me out in this, I was going to do something for Ethiopia before Band-Aid and before the local version of Band-Aid, but they've beaten us to us. But because that problem of Ethiopia will be with us for a long time, and they'll need aid possibly next year, I think people identify me these days with singing White Christmas. So who knows, I might do a remake of White Christmas.
Nice one. What's the Fullerton dream for 1985?
On the sporting front, Northern Ireland soccer team to qualify for the World Cup finals again. Barry McGuigan, the boxer, to win a world title. Joey Dunlop on his motorbike to win his 4th world title. And Alex Higgins, I think, to win another world title. Yeah. Although it would be nice to see Dennis Taylor, who's such a lovely man, really doing something in the World Championship this year. Personally, I'm having a bungalow built at the moment. I'm living in a rented house the past few months. The new bungalow should be ready about March. Looking forward to moving into that.
Is it hyper-luxurious?
It is not.
Befitting of your image?
It is not hyper-luxurious. There's only 17 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms. It's
what would you expect?
Not pretentious at all. No, it's an average bungalow, but very big gardens. It's on a nice site. So my biggest dream of 1985 is really to find someone to do the gardens for me.
Jerry Kelly.
A big man for a big garden.
Jackie Fullerton, thank you.
Thank you.
The man whose temperament matches his endearing smile. My guest, Jackie Fullerton. My thanks to Jackie for giving so generously of his time, and to you for being with us again this evening